Welcome to part 2 of the multi-plane panning background tutorial. I trust that you survived part 1, so welcome to part 2. So let's get started. Okay, now before I start to build up this foreground area, now that I've placed the background mountains, this seems a little barren back there. So I want to fill that in with some more content. So let's do that. We'll hide front set of mountains and we'll start to tackle this background. So we'll lock everything, create a new layer, and start to build some assets. Now I'm going to build these assets the same way I built these mountains, the same way I built the clouds. Let's start with a cactus. So we have our pen tool selected, and we'll just click right on there. Now you can create your cactus however you like. There are a plethora of different kinds of cacti. But as for right now, you don't have to worry about the size, because after we adjust these lines, we could resize it, or we can change the color of it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's make this guy look a little bit more like a cactus, just by editing these nodes. That looks pretty good. Let's make this a little thinner. And there you go. Let's place him on the canvas where we want him. Let's change his color by selecting fill. That's a little too dark. And there we go. We have a cactus in our background. We can actually put him in our library by selecting this Add to Library tool, and we can reuse him. We can reuse it as many times as we want. Let's rename this layer. Background elements. And let's pull another cactus out. So we pull this cactus out from the library, and it will automatically make a new layer on top of all the other layers. We don't want him on the very top. We're going to move him right back down above the layer we just created. We'll resize by holding Shift, uniform scale. Let's create another cactus. We'll make a new layer. We'll make one of those spiky cacti by, again, just clicking with the pen tool. Not so much worried about size right now. Just the points. That's good. Close it up. We'll zoom right in there. And we'll clean it up. The Convert to Bezier tool. We'll move some nodes around. And these don't have to be very detailed. I mean, these are far away from the camera. So these do not have to be detailed at all. They can be very simple. Because as things go further back in the scene, they tend to lose a great deal of detail. So we just have to have a rough look of a cactus, and that's good. Let's just scale it a little bit. And there you go. Place it right there. We'll add it to the library so we can add it again and again. We'll rename it. We'll zoom out, see how that looks. Looks great. So now let's pull it out and place it. It's a good spot. Move that layer down with the others. Let's place one over here. Make it a little smaller. Holding shift, it's a uniform scale. Looks great. And let's see what we have. Already, just by adding those two designs, starting to fill in our background to make it look a lot less sparse. So let's create one more cactus. Let's do the one that let's create one of those the cacti that looks like it's made up of ovals. So we'll move that layer to go with the others. We'll zoom back in. We'll place it over here with the spiky one. And instead of using our pen tool, we'll make a new layer and we'll use the oval tool. And we'll just create a series of shapes. To make our cactus. Now, as you see, as I created all those ovals, I kept it in one layer with a little drop down. And all those layers, I made a new layer for each shape that I created, but kept it in the same layer that I created. We'll name that layer. And now let's adjust these circles. We don't want them to be perfect circles. So we'll go into the Convert Bezier tool. And we'll just adjust these just a little bit so they're not so perfect. And just by moving around a few of the nodes, you can see the cactus take shape. And it's more interesting than just a couple ovals. And there you go. Let's fix this one real fast. That looks great. So let's zoom out. I think I'm going to create one more cactus so things don't look so uniform. Let's just, this is going to be very simple. We'll create a new layer. We'll use the pen tool. We'll zoom in and adjust that cactus. Oh, we need another node. Add the node tool. And there we go. We'll adjust those. That's just a little bit smaller. There we go. Okay, so now that we are finished adding background elements, we can either do one of two things. We can either group these together, or we can put them all on the same layer. They're all going to be animated at the same rate, so I'm going to add them all to the same layer. So all you have to do is come down to your layers, select by holding Shift, select the first one, then by holding Shift, it'll select the other layers, and we can just click and drag them onto the Mountains 2 layer. Oh, but first we have to unlock it. Now let's select those layers again. They're highlighted, and just click and drag, and you'll see that if you drag it underneath, it'll create a bigger line underneath that layer. But if we just hover right over top of it, there's a line that goes through the name of that layer, and that's exactly what we want. So we'll just unclick, and now you will see on that Mountains 2 layer, there's a little drop down arrow. And if we click that, now we can go in and individually animate or edit all those cacti we just created. But we don't need to edit them or animate them separately, so we'll just click back on that drop down. We'll select that Mountains 2 layer, and you can see they have all been grouped together without having to group them together. Now let's unhide the Mountain 1 layer that we hid previously, and now you can see where we might need to add some more elements. So I don't like this empty space in front of this rock formation, and I don't like that empty space in front of that rock formation, and we're just going to drop in some of those cacti that we created. Drop one there, can drop one here, and that's much better. Now you can add as many of these as you want. You can drop and resize them. I'll zoom in a little bit closer to resize it because they're fairly small. There we go. And select these cacti we just added and drop them to that Mountains 2 layer. And now they are part of that same layer. But if we need to move them around, or I don't like the certain position, since they are not grouped, I can move those elements individually. That's what it has above grouping. Now, if I would have grouped these together, I would not be able to do that unless I went into that group edited that group, and then came back out to see what it would look like on the canvas. So let's zoom out and see how that looks. And that looks great. Okay, so now let's add our car to the scene. I have my car in the library. We'll just drag him right out and place him in the scene. There he is. We'll lock his layer, drag it underneath that camera layer. And now we can start to animate the mountains behind him. So we'll select that layer, and we will grab that group, and we will drag it as far left as we want. We'll go right about there. Should be good. We're doing this because we're going to have it pan to the right. So now we're going to grab that scrubber, bring it to about 10, and drag that layer all the way back to the right. So about there. And now you can see that Animatron created a keyframe for us. It created two keyframes, one for the first position and two for the second. So if we scroll back and forth, it'll go back and forth, creating those in-betweens for us in between those two keyframes. So now we can preview the animation and take a look of how it's going to look. Looks great. And now based on that animation, we can animate the elements behind it. So let's do that. We'll lock that mountain layer. We'll unlock the mountain 2 layer. We'll grab those objects. Pull them to the left. Go to about 10. And then pull them right back to the right. Now you'll notice it does animate when we scrub through it, but Animatron forgot to give us our keyframes. But as you remember, instead of grouping this set of designs, we just added them to the same layer. So if we go over to this little drop down and drop it down, you can see there are those keyframes for every element on that layer. So if we want to go in and individually change some of that animation, we can do that. But we'll go over that a little bit later. Right now I just want to get the timing right for that plane. So we'll close that drop down and we can preview this animation. That actually looks pretty good. I don't think I have to adjust the timing at all. However, as it's animating, I see some bare spots that I would like to add some content to. So we can hide those set of mountains and just scrub through this animation. And you can see that there's a bare spot before and after. So I'm going to go into this mountain group and I'm going to add a few more rock formations. So we'll click into that. Now these don't have to be anything crazy, but I just need to extend this group so when we pan it, there are no bare spots. So again, we'll just use that pen tool and create some shapes. And we'll adjust it with the Bezier node tool. Adjust some things. That looks pretty good. We'll select that, choose a fill to match the other colors, and get rid of the stroke. Let's go ahead and let's add a little rock on this side. Let's just add just a quick little rock. There you go. We'll add one more to this side. We're still using the pen tool. We'll create another formation. Very simple, doesn't have to be crazy. And that's good. Let's see what that looks like. I don't really like that one. Let's go in and edit it just a little bit. Let's add a few more nodes to it with the add node tool. We can pull those up. Oops. We can pull those up. And that looks much better. Let's go back to the scene, and there we go. And let's scrub through that animation. Let's move that first keyframe over just a tad. There we go. And that looks great. Now by just adjusting this layer, we've created two separate animations on that same layer. As you can see, those cacti no longer animate with those rock formations. So you get a second set of animation within that one layer. And now let's preview that animation. It looks great. Now let's go into the car group and create some animation with the car. So we'll just unlock his layer, we'll go into that group, and we can see that the car is separated in several different layers. The body, the windows, the chrome, and the wheels. We could animate the wheels, but I think they're so far away and so small I don't think we'd be able to tell. But what we can do, we can create a plume of dust behind the car as it's driving. So we can create a new layer. We'll name that layer dust. Now it just so happens that I have a shape in my library that I can use, but I created it just like I created the clouds and the rock formations with that pen tool. We'll just drag that right on stage and place it. Now, obviously we don't want this dust plume to be green, so we can select that and go to fill. We're going to put a gradient on there, a linear gradient. Pick linear gradient. We'll pick that orange color. We don't want that other color to be green. We'll pick a lighter color as it fades. It looks great, but there's a trick that we could use. We can change the opacity. Now there's a little slider under here that can change the opacity of the whole gradient, and that's nice, but we don't want to change the whole opacity of this, because when a dust plume first gets kicked up by your car, it's fairly opaque, and then as it dissipates, it gets thinner in the air. So we could achieve this by clicking on that little color square and changing that individual opacity of that one color, and you could see, and that looks great. We can click back out, and we can click into that darker color and just change its opacity just slightly. Click out, hit OK, and it looks perfect. We can take a look in our scene how that's going to look. You can barely see the smoke, and that's great. You can still see it just slightly, and we want it to be slight. We just want it to be just an added effect animation just to pull the scene together. So we'll go right back into the car, and now we can animate this plume by moving the scrubber and right-clicking, inserting a keyframe, and then insert another keyframe. So the first keyframe and the keyframe on 1, we don't want to adjust. We want to change that middle keyframe, and all we want to do is just squeeze it ever so slightly. Maybe squeeze it down this way and replace it, and then we can scrub, and now it looks like as the car's driving, it's kicking up some dirt. Now we need this animation to play until 10, all the way over here. We can manually place all those keyframes and edit it and squeeze it, but Animatron makes it easy for you. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is click, type in how many times you want it to loop. We'll put 10, and we're good to go. Now that animation is going to loop 10 times. And we can preview that in our scene. And there you go. Now, if you want to adjust the color of it, just so we can see it a little bit better, let's go right into that gradient. And we can just make that just a little darker. Of a color. Let's take a look. There we go. And let's preview that. So now it actually looks like the car is moving. Now that we have established some animation, this is the end of part 2. In part 3, we will begin to fill out our foreground and continue animating. I look forward to seeing you there.